Hey, thanks for joining me. So today I want to talk about how I keep my knives sharp. What do I do to keep everything nice and keen and cutting well? And I really enjoy and love a good sharp knife, and the sharper the better, as far as I'm concerned. Now, despite the fact I'm half Japanese, you won't see me using water stones. And not that there's anything wrong with them. They work really well. I've tried them. I know that's maybe part of one side of my culture, but I've just grown up using Arkansas stones. They're plentiful and available. I live in Oklahoma. Arkansas is right next door, and stones from Arkansas, the Arkansas stones and Washita stones. I mean, I grew up deer hunting down in the Washita Mountains in southeast Oklahoma. So that's just kind of a part of the culture here, and that's just what I've always used. But I want to talk about how I do this and how I learned how to sharpen knives a little bit. This is actually a translucent Arkansas stone that I got. My dad bought me when I was young. I don't know, 10 or 12 years old. And up to that point, I had little carborundum stones that I'd got in different places. Those coarse little oil stones that you can't get a really fine edge on a knife with them, and I really struggled to do that. So my dad buys me this Arkansas stone, and so then I just immediately switched over to this and sharpen and sharpen and sharpen and sharpen, and you can sharpen forever and not get a dull knife really sharp. It was just, if and we'll talk about the different grades of stones, but a translucent Arkansas stone is one of the finest, finest grades of Arkansas. They're just super smooth. And they're not made for removing large amounts of material or reestablishing the edge on a dull blade. They're made for polishing an already nearly sharp edge. And I appreciate what my dad bought me, and I treasure this stone now today. He didn't really quite buy me what was the most useful thing. So I want to talk about, when you buy stones and you're looking at stones, what do you need, what do you want to get? And so let's talk about how you can set yourself up with some sharpening stones and how to use them. I think it's real important to understand the different grades and how they work and what you do with them. And it's very similar to what you do with water stones, starting off with coarser grades, and as you work the knife on one grade, you move up to the next finer grade to get to that sharpest edge. And you can take that to an extreme and with water stones you can have many steps, which with Arkansas stones there's only like 3 steps you can really have. So maybe 4 if you stretch it. But let's talk about how to use these stones, how I've been successful with them. I started off being very frustrated with this stone, and now I treasure it. I know how to use it, and it just delivers beautiful polished edge. So let's get on the bench here and take a look at some of these. And kind of a bonus thing, kind of towards the end of this, I'm going to kind of walk you through, the Arkansas stones that you might find today, how to improve them so that they work better, and get them ready to use. And so let's take a look. But before we do, if you would please click on the like and subscribe buttons, and let's take a look. Okay, let's get started. So I know I mentioned Arkansas stones in the beginning of this, and definitely that is what I use for my sharpening when I'm here at home. But I did want to mention a couple other things when I am not at home. If I'm traveling, there's a couple other options I use. This is a diamond stone that I have glued leather on the back of, and I use flex cut gold to load the strop with that polishing compound for stropping. This is a DF Sharp extra fine. I think it's around 1,000 or 1,200 grit. And it does a really nice job, doesn't require any lubricants, and so that's pretty handy. The other option I carry sometimes when I travel is this Spyderco double stuff. It is a ceramic stone. One side is medium, the other side is fine. Again, that Spyderco doesn't list specific grits, but I think you're probably in the 800 grit range here and 1,000 to 1,200 here. And these are really nice in that comes with a little leather pouch. I can keep this in my briefcase when I travel. If I need to touch up a knife blade or something, super handy. You clean this with abrasive cleaner like a Comet or a bartender's friend, and get it wet and some of that cleaner and a rag and scrub it, and all the black residue will come right off of it. So super handy. And this other one is one I keep in some of my wood carving tools. This is one I bought at Woodcraft a while back. It's a Pinnacle combination soft Arkansas, black Arkansas, and it's not a translucent or anything, but it's pretty handy. I keep it some of my wood carving stuff. And so again, some options I use, but the majority of the time when I am sharpening, I start with this. This is a Washita stone. It actually was my grandfather's. And you can tell a Washita stone, they have this kind of porous look to them. Now this one I think is what they'd call a number 1. There's also one called a lily white that's whiter, obviously. Looks more like maybe a soft Arkansas stone, but they are different. Now one of the things that's really nice about a Washita stone is that they're almost kind of like 2 stones in one. When I'm sharpening a knife with this, if I bear down a little bit, it'll cut pretty aggressively, and I can use it to reestablish an edge on a dull knife. I even take out some minor nicks. But if I put very little pressure on it, just kind of dance on this stone very lightly with a knife blade, then it will deliver an edge that's very polished and will shave, like hair off your arm. It's sharp. Not as sharp as you'd get maybe with a translucent Arkansas stone, but it is very nice. If I could only have one stone, if somebody decreed that you could only have one sharpening stone, this would be it. Like I say, this was my grandfather's. If you put a straight edge on this, there's almost no wear on it, and he used it for a lot of years. Just a wonderful stone, one I really treasure. After that stone, I'll go to a translucent Arkansas stone. I have a couple of different translucents. I have a full-size bench stone that's a translucent. I have a smaller one like this. This is the one my dad bought me when I was 10 or 12 years old. You can actually see oil kind of seeping out of the fissures in this stone. It does have some fissures. Like I say, I've had it over 50 years and it hasn't broken. But I'm sure if you dropped it on the concrete, it probably would. But those fissures don't necessarily go all the way through the stone. That's not uncommon to see fissures in a stone. They're not a reason necessarily to object or to reject the stone. You cannot feel them. You don't hang up your blade or anything when you're sharpening. It's just something to kind of be aware of. But this is a translucent. If you put a light behind this, you'll actually see light come through it. The other translucent stone, and this is one I really treasure, is this black Norton translucent stone. I bought this at an antique flea market for like $15. Even still has the Norton sticker inside. Originally there was a Norton, you can see where the shadow of it was. There was a Norton label on the front at one time. A translucent black, you can kind of tell, if you put a light against the edge of this, you can see a little bit of light shine through. But if you look at the edges of it, you can almost see how the edge kind of has a lighter look, or almost, it does probably look the same on the camera, but in real life, you look at this, the edge almost seems to glow a little bit. Light is actually refracting through the edge of that stone. And but this is a translucent. It's very, very smooth. Probably one of the finest grades of Arkansas stone you can get. If you find a black translucent like that, they're really nice. I don't know. Arkansas stones are not rated by grit necessarily, but if you had to give this a number, it's probably in the 4,000 to 8,000 grit range. It's way up there. This will put a polished edge on a blade that's actually will make the blade sharper than using that diamond stone with the strop afterwards. It actually puts a better polish on the edge than that strop does. So after I use this stone, I don't ever use a strop afterwards. If I do, the knife actually gets a little duller. So this stone is one of my favorites. So my normal process is, if the knife's fairly dull, this Washita stone, first with a little bit of pressure, then lightly, and then this stone to finish, and I'll have an edge that is just incredibly sharp. Now, how do I do that? Let's say you have a knife to sharpen. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm not the kind of guy that does things like everybody else. I'll typically use an oil on the stone. I use sewing machine oil. You can get, this is a bottle of Singer sewing machine oil. It's just a lightweight machine oil. You can buy this at Walmart. The brand is Dritz, and it's sewing machine oil, but it's a very thin, very lightweight machine oil. Now I know some people use other things, kerosene and lamp oil and all kinds of things. I think the main thing is just having a lightweight oil that keeps the particles floated out of the pores of the stone. And so, you can put your blade on the stone, lift it up until you see the oil kind of squeeze out along the edge. That means you've got the bevel on the stone, and then make a slicing motion like you're slicing some of the stone off the top, and then either reverse that, you can pull the blade or you can push it, either one. But again, the same thing, you start with the blade down and then lift it up until you see that oil squeeze out of the edge. That shows you the bevel, and then maintain that angle. And that's the challenge, to learn to maintain those angles. Once I've got this stone has been used to reestablish the edge and get it as fine as I can, then I'll switch to a smaller stone like this one. I do have a large translucent stone if I've got a bigger, like a wood chisel, or maybe a bigger knife that I need a bigger stone for, I can use that. But I often use this. And the other thing that I do, and again, different than most people, when I was young, most of the stones I had were little bitty pocket stones. And so I learned to hold a stone in my hand and the knife in the other hand, and actually sharpen with them in my hands and hold the right angles. And that was just something that I learned to do because my stones that I had were small. And if you do that, you have to be careful, especially with a stone like this, that you don't let your fingers come up over the edge of the stone. Otherwise you will slice off the end of your fingers. So you got to make sure your fingers are below the level of the stone, and you can sharpen holding that. Now that's just something I learned how to do. I'm not saying it's the best way to do it, and most people would probably say it's not. But it's just a technique that I learned when I was much younger, and I learned to be able to see and hold the bevels the way I wanted, and holding the stones in my hands. And like I say, I don't really necessarily recommend that for anyone else. It's just the way I did it, because I started off with stones that were small enough you had to do that. I always make a motion on the knife like I'm slicing into the stone. I never drag the knife or go in circles. I know other people do, and if that works for you, I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not the way I do it. So anyway, one other thing I wanted to go over about Arkansas stones. A lot of times when you buy Arkansas stones these days, they're not very smooth. If you look at this, and I'm not saying anything bad about Smiths, but these stones are not that smooth. The edges are not chamfered, they're rough. The stones themselves are relatively rough. This is a medium is probably a soft Arkansas, the fine is probably a hard Arkansas, and then the coarse is a carborundum stone. But when you see a lot of Arkansas stones these days, especially when you buy inexpensive ones like this, they're just not going to be very well finished. So one of the things you can do, Harbor Freight sells this diamond block hone, and it's not very expensive, and it comes with a little stand, which I don't use, and it's got this diamond stone. Now, I did not buy this to sharpen knives with, though I suppose I could. What I bought it for was used to condition Arkansas stones. So there's 200, 300, 400, and 600 grit on this, and I'll just go under the kitchen sink, and I'll get them both wet. Start with if the stone's pretty rough, I'll start with 200, and just start, kind of random motions, start working this stone and the diamond hone together, and you'll see in the water that's on the stone, you'll see this slurry kind of develop that matches the color of the stone as it wears away some of that material. And once I get it evenly done on one grit like 200, then I'll go to 300, then 400, 600, keep going until I get to the finest grit. Sometimes if I get a stone like this Pinnacle stone that I showed you a minute ago, when I got it, it was not that smooth, but it wasn't that bad either. I started off at 400 grit, and then went to 600, and then used the 300 grit side to kind of bevel the corners a little bit, smooth them up, and made for a much nicer stone. So that makes that stone look a lot and feel a lot better, easier to use. It gives you a sharper knife. So anyway, if you get a stone like this and it's a little rough, one of these is pretty handy. And really probably the only reason I mean, you could buy a better quality stone and not have to do this. But if you're kind of like me and you know, if you stumble across stones here and there, and sometimes they're not flat, or sometimes they need to be reconditioned, or maybe they're glazed and you want to get the glaze off of them, this is handy for just reconditioning stones. So anyway, I'll like I say, use this in some running water to flatten the stones and to smooth them, and then use like the 200 or 300 grit to bevel the edges, you know, just back and forth with it wet. And then you can take a stone like this and make it much nicer. And so that's you know, if you run across an Arkansas stone or something that's seems to be a good buy, but maybe it's a little worn and dished out, or maybe it's just a little rough, that's a way you can straighten it up. So there you go. Ouachita, hard black Arkansas, that's my kind of current favorite combo. Like I say, Ouachita stones are mined or quarried in the same areas that Arkansas stones are, but I believe that Norton owns the only quarry that has real Ouachita stones in it, and they do not quarry them anymore, as I understand it. So if you want a Ouachita stone, you're probably going to have to find a used or an old one. You know, if it comes in a box or something and it says it's a Ouachita stone, then that's pretty easy to identify. Otherwise, Ouachitas do have this kind of porous look to them that makes them a little bit easy to identify, and so it's a great stone to have. And yeah, so the Washita, the reason they're called Ouachita stones is they come from the Washita Mountains. Ouachita stones are really special if you can find one. Anyway, that's kind of what I do. There you go. Arkansas stones, sharpening stones. I hope some of this information was helpful to you. You know, everyone has their own way of doing things, and this is just kind of the way I've settled on. I think part of it to me is I really enjoy using these natural stones. You know, this Norton did a beautiful job. This is one of my favorites, this black translucent hard Arkansas stone. It's made by Norton. Just beautiful. But you know, the stone itself, that's all God's work, and that's just, I don't know, it's just a little beautiful piece of rock. I know that's kind of silly. Maybe it's the same way some people look at gemstones and stuff. I don't know. But to someone like me, this is a gem. Anyway, if you have any thoughts or questions, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment. I always love hearing from you. And as always, thanks for watching.